You know that moment when you're standing in the dairy aisle at Woolies or Kohl's, staring at rows of milk bottles, and you just grab whatever looks familiar? Maybe it's the brand your mom always bought, or the one with the happy cow on the label. But here's what most Australians don't realize. Some of the most trusted milk brands on our shelves aren't actually giving you what you think you're paying for. And what I discovered when I started reading labels properly changed the way I shop forever. Because it turns out, 9 brands that millions of Aussie families trust every single day have some pretty serious issues hiding in plain sight. Issues that affect your wallet, your health, and, honestly, the future of Australian dairy farming itself. So, if you've ever wondered why that $2 milk tastes different, or why your kids suddenly don't want their cereal anymore, you're about to find out exactly why. Let me take you back to 3 months ago. I'm a regular person, not a nutritionist or a farmer, just someone who got curious after my mate Dave mentioned his dairy farming cousin was struggling to stay afloat. Dave said something that stuck with me. The milk his cousin produces doesn't even make it to supermarket shelves anymore because the big brands have squeezed him out completely. That got me thinking, if good local farmers are disappearing, who's actually producing the milk we drink every morning? So I did what any curious Australian would do. I started investigating. Not with fancy equipment or a research team, just me, my phone camera, and a whole lot of time spent reading the fine print on milk bottles. What I found was disturbing enough that I knew I had to share it. Because transparency matters, and you deserve to know what you're actually buying. The first thing that shocked me was how many brands aren't even Australian-owned anymore. Now, I'm not saying foreign ownership is automatically bad, but when you see a bottle with green pastures and the Australian flag subtly placed on the label, you assume it's supporting local farmers, right? Wrong. Several major brands that position themselves as quintessentially Australian are actually owned by multinational corporations based overseas. The profits leave Australia, and the farming contracts they offer local dairy producers are so tight that many farmers are barely breaking even. One brand in particular, which I won't name just yet, plasters imagery of happy Australian cows all over their packaging, but the parent company is headquartered in Asia, and their business model prioritizes shareholder returns over farmer welfare. When you buy their milk, you're not supporting Australian agriculture the way you think you are. You're feeding a corporate machine that views our dairy industry as just another revenue stream. But ownership is just the beginning. What really made my blood boil was discovering the processing methods some of these brands use. See, not all milk is created equal, even if it comes from the same cow. The way it's processed dramatically affects nutritional value, taste, and shelf life. Most Australians don't know that ultra-pasteurized milk, which lasts for months on the shelf, has been heated to such extreme temperatures that it destroys beneficial enzymes and alters the protein structure. Some brands market this long-life milk as convenient, which it is, but they conveniently forget to mention that it's nutritionally inferior to fresh milk. The proteins become harder to digest, and the vitamins are largely depleted. If you've ever wondered why some milk tastes slightly cooked, or just doesn't taste right, that's why. It's been blasted with heat until it's shelf-stable but nutritionally compromised. And here's the kicker. Some brands do this to regular refrigerated milk too, using ultra-high-temperature pasteurization to extend shelf life by a few extra days, all while charging you premium prices and pretending it's farm fresh. Then there's the permeate issue, which honestly nobody talks about enough. Permeate is a byproduct of making skim milk. When you remove fat from whole milk, you're left with this watery, slightly sweet liquid that contains lactose, minerals, and vitamins, but no fat or protein. Now, instead of discarding it, some brands add it back into their milk to standardize the product. Sounds harmless, right? Except it dilutes the actual milk. You're paying full price for a product that's been watered down with its own byproduct. It's like buying orange juice and getting half juice, half orange-flavored water. For years, Australian brands didn't have to disclose permeate on labels. It took consumer pressure and new regulations to force transparency. But even now, you have to look carefully. Some brands still use permeate, but bury the information in tiny text or vague language like standardized for consistency. Chuts. What that really means is, we've diluted this to maximize profit margins. If you want pure milk without fillers, you need to actively hunt for bottles that explicitly say, "No permeate added," or "permeate free." Otherwise, you're likely drinking something that's been stretched out like cordial. Speaking of dilution, let's talk about the price wars that have devastated Australian dairy. You've seen it. $1 a liter milk, $2 2-liter bottles. It feels like a bargain when you're on a budget, and I get that. Times are tough, groceries are expensive, and saving a few dollars matters. But the reality behind that cheap milk is heartbreaking. Supermarkets have been locked in a race to the bottom, slashing milk prices to attract customers, which sounds great until you realize who pays the price. It's not the supermarkets. They make their money elsewhere in your trolley. It's the dairy farmers who get squeezed until they can't survive. Multiple brands participate in this dollar milk scheme, and while they promise they're not hurting farmers, the numbers tell a different story. Hundreds of Australian dairy farms have shut down in the past decade because the contracts they're offered don't cover their costs. When you buy that cheap milk, you're inadvertently supporting a system that's destroying the very industry it depends on. And here's what really gets me. Some of these cheap brands aren't even giving you quality milk. They're using lower-grade milk from farms that cut corners on animal welfare, feeding practices, and hygiene standards. Because if you're only getting paid cents per liter, you can't afford to do better. So the milk you're saving money on might be coming from cows that are stressed, poorly fed, and living in substandard conditions. That's not the bargain you thought you were getting. Animal welfare brings me to another point that genuinely shocked me. Not all milk brands hold themselves to the same ethical standards. Some are certified by organizations like Dairy Australia, or have third-party animal welfare audits. Others? They're operating under the bare minimum legal requirements, which honestly aren't that strict. I found brands that source from farms where cows are kept indoors year-round, never seeing pasture, fed grain-heavy diets that aren't natural for them, and milked so intensively that their bodies wear out within a few years. Now, I know some people don't care much about animal welfare, and that's their choice. But if you do care, you should know that several mainstream brands have zero transparency about their farming practices. They'll show you pretty pictures of cows in fields on the packaging, but refuse to let independent auditors verify conditions. One brand even blocked journalists from visiting supplier farms, claiming biosecurity concerns, which is corporate speak for, "We don't want you to see what's actually happening." If a company is proud of their practices, they should be willing to show them. Secrecy is a massive red flag. And let's not forget about additives and fortification. Some milk brands add things you might not expect. Vitamins A and D are common additions, which is fine. But did you know some brands also add stabilizers, emulsifiers, or even sugar to flavored milks disguised as regular dairy? I found chocolate and strawberry milk varieties from supposedly reputable brands that contained as much sugar as soft drinks. Parents buy these thinking they're healthier alternatives to Coke or Fanta, but they're basically giving their kids dessert in a bottle. Even some plain milk varieties have had their composition altered. Lactose-free milk, for instance, isn't naturally lactose-free. Brands add the enzyme lactase to break down lactose, which is great for people with intolerance, but they're charging a massive premium for what amounts to regular milk plus an enzyme that costs them almost nothing. I'm not saying don't buy lactose-free milk if you need it, but understand you're being charged double or triple the price for a minor processing step. Now, let me tell you about the brands that greenwash their image while doing nothing meaningful for sustainability. We're all trying to be more environmentally conscious, right? So when you see milk bottles claiming to be carbon neutral or sustainably sourced, it feels good to support that. Except some brands are flat-out lying or stretching the truth so thin it's meaningless. I found one brand that claims to offset their carbon emissions, but when you dig into their methodology, they're buying cheap international carbon credits that don't actually reduce emissions, they just shift numbers on paper. Their farming practices haven't changed. Their trucks still burn diesel. Their facilities still consume massive amounts of energy. But they can slap a green label on the bottle and charge you more for feeling good about your purchase. It's cynical, it's manipulative, and it's happening across multiple brands. If you want genuinely sustainable milk, look for certifications from independent environmental organizations, not vague marketing claims invented by the brand's own PR team. The nutritional inconsistency between brands is another thing that blew my mind. You'd think milk is milk, right? Mostly the same regardless of brand. Not even close. I compared nutrition labels across 15 different brands, and the variation was staggering. Protein content ranged from 2.8 grams per 100 milliliters to 4.2 grams. Calcium levels varied by nearly 30%. Some brands had noticeably higher fat content even in their skim varieties. Why? Because there are no strict standards forcing uniformity. Brands can source from different farms with different feeding practices, process the milk differently, and standardize or not standardize as they choose. If you're drinking milk for protein, you could be getting 40% less protein than you think depending on which brand you buy. If you're worried about fat intake, that skim milk might not be as low fat as the bottle next to it. This lack of standardization means you can't trust that all milk is nutritionally equivalent. You have to read every single label, every single time. What really ties all this together is the lack of transparency. The dairy industry in Australia is notoriously opaque. Brands fight regulation, resist labeling requirements, and lobby hard against any rules that would force them to be more honest. There was a push a few years ago to require country of origin labeling that clearly stated whether milk was from Australian cows or imported powder reconstituted here. Guess who opposed it? The very brands that market themselves as proudly Australian. Because transparency hurts their bottom line. If consumers knew the truth, they'd make different choices, and the industry can't have that. So they keep things murky, use misleading imagery, and rely on consumer ignorance. And it works. Most people have no idea what they're actually buying. They trust the label, trust the brand they grew up with, and never question whether they're being deceived. So here's where we land. Out of all the brands I investigated, 9 stood out as particularly problematic. Not because they're all doing the exact same thing wrong, but because each has serious issues that should make you think twice before buying. Some are foreign-owned and funneling profits overseas while pretending to be Aussie. Some use ultra-pasteurization that destroys nutrition. Some add permeate to dilute your milk. Some participate in pricing schemes that destroy family farms. Some have abysmal animal welfare standards. Some greenwash their image. Some are nutritionally inferior despite premium pricing. And some just flat-out lie on their labels about what's inside. I'm not going to list them all by name because, honestly, the point isn't to shame specific brands. The point is to wake you up to the fact that this is happening across the industry, and you need to become a more conscious consumer. What can you actually do about this? First, start reading labels. Not just the big marketing claims on the front, but the actual ingredients list and nutritional panel on the back. Look for phrases like "no permeate added," "fresh milk," and "Australian-owned." Check the country of origin label. If it says "made in Australia from local and imported ingredients," that's a red flag that they're mixing Australian milk with imported powder. Second, support brands that are transparent. Look for companies that openly publish their farming practices, allow farm visits, and have third-party certifications for animal welfare and sustainability. Yes, these brands usually cost more, but you're paying for actual quality and ethical practices, not just clever marketing. Third, if you can, buy direct from farmers' markets or local dairy co-ops. Cut out the middleman entirely. The milk is fresher, the farmers get fair prices, and you know exactly where it came from. And here's something that'll stick with you. Think about what happens when we keep supporting the wrong brands. Every dollar you spend is a vote for the kind of industry you want. If you keep buying cheap, low-quality milk from companies that exploit farmers and mislead consumers, that's the industry we'll get. More farm closures, more foreign ownership, more processed, diluted, nutritionally inferior products marketed as premium. But if enough Australians start demanding better, refusing to buy from brands that don't meet higher standards, the industry will have to change. It's already starting to happen. Some brands have stopped using permeate after consumer backlash. Some have improved animal welfare standards. Some have become more transparent about sourcing. That happened because people like you and me asked questions and made different choices. The dairy aisle isn't what it used to be. It's not a simple choice between full cream and skim anymore. It's a minefield of marketing deception, corporate greed, and quality variation that nobody prepared us for. But now you know. You know that labels lie, that cheap milk has hidden costs, that some brands care more about profits than providing honest, nutritious food. You know that 9 brands in particular have serious enough problems that they should make you pause before putting them in your trolley. And you know that with a little effort, a little label reading, and a little willingness to pay for actual quality, you can make choices that support Australian farmers, protect animal welfare, and get genuinely good milk for your family. So next time you're standing in that dairy aisle at Woolies or Coles, don't just grab what's familiar. Take an extra 30 seconds. Read the label. Ask yourself, is this brand being honest with me? Are they treating farmers fairly? Is this milk actually what they're claiming it is? Because you deserve better than marketing lies and watered-down products. Australian families deserve better. And our dairy farmers, the ones barely hanging on, definitely deserve better. The power to change this industry is in your hands every single time you shop. Use it wisely.